So I just got done seeing Black Panther Wakanda Forever in theaters, and I got quite a few things to say about it. This is just going to be a review, a non-spoiler review, and then the later half of it we're going to get in some spoilers, just a couple spoilers. There's nothing too big to talk about, but there's definitely a couple things that I would rather not say in the non-spoiler section, just to make sure your experience is as fresh as humanly possible. I am going to be doing a ranking of all 30 MCU films. Hopefully I'll have that uploaded by tomorrow. That's going to be a really exciting video to do, but today we're just going to be talking about Black Panther Wakanda Forever itself. So first of all, let me get into the positives of this movie, because I will say right off the bat, there's a lot more positives than negatives. This is a movie I thoroughly enjoyed, thankfully, because I haven't really talked about the first film on this channel, because obviously I wasn't uploading movie reviews by the time that first film came out. But it was never one that I absolutely loved. Like, I always kind of like, oh, it's okay, I enjoyed it to a degree, but I never had this like deep founding love for it like I know a lot of people did. But this one, I actually enjoyed quite a bit more, I would say. Not like a crazy bit more, but definitely way more than I enjoyed the first one. So first of all, one of the best positives of this movie is how they handle T'Challa's death. So obviously they had to do something with that. They couldn't just go on with the film with just forgetting about his character, because of course that's something that matters to this universe. They have to mention it somehow. And the way they deal with it, I'm not going to go into detail about how to deal with it, but I think it was actually handled really respectfully, and they didn't do no like, they didn't do none of that like, CGI deep fake stuff for, to make him there and then have him killed off some way. That would have been terrible. Thankfully, they handled it in a way that made sense. It was mature, and it made for a really emotional experience throughout most of the film. A lot of the film obviously revolves around that, but it's not like the only focus of the film, which I think is also good, because if the whole film was just about his death, that would obviously feel a bit like odd for the story that they're trying to tell. But pretty much a lot of stuff that happens in this film is sort of caused because of that, because of what's going on around the world after his death. It mainly revolves around vibranium. I'm not going to go in depth with what the plot is as well, because the trailers don't really give you that much information about what the story is about. So it actually was a surprise to see what the story was about. And a lot of it does play off of the first film. A lot of it has to do with like militaristic power around the world. A lot of it has to do with the vibranium. And there are other nations getting involved here with the vibranium, and that's basically what causes the whole conflict in this film. And I think the conflict was really interesting, and it was mature, and it was serious, and to me that's the most important thing. It was mature, it was serious, and interesting. Those are like the three pillars I want for a good film story. Now, of course, I'm completely okay with having some goofy fun in some of these Marvel films. I'm not the type of person who's like, oh no, they all have to be serious, but at the same time, I do prefer having some more serious moments, and especially a film like this, it had to be serious. You could not make this film and throw in a bunch of jokes, and thankfully, that's one of my best positives of this film. They don't throw in a bunch of jokes. There's maybe like 5 jokes in the whole movie, and they're actually not that bad. Like, some of them are actually kind of funny, and a lot of them are even unintentional, so I think it worked. I don't really have any issue with the tone of this film. I think the tone was absolutely perfect all the way through. And it's a long movie. This is a long movie. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes. When I saw that runtime, I was like, oh my God, how are they going to handle this properly? And thankfully they did. It actually did not feel like the runtime was too much longer than it should have been. I'm completely okay with long runtimes. I'm never the type of person to be against that, other than the fact that I have to pee very consistently during movies, so when they're longer, it makes it very hard not to use the bathroom. But I really think that the pacing of this film was really good. I never felt bored. There was not a single moment that I felt like they were wasting time. I never was not interested in what was happening on screen, so that is obviously a huge positive. Now let's talk about the villain, Namor. So Namor, I think, is one of the best MCU villains of all time. I would say he's probably in the top 10, which honestly isn't like a hard thing to achieve, because there's not like that many incredible MCU villains. A lot of them are known for being like kind of lackluster, but I will say they've been getting better with villains over time. I think phase 3 and 4 especially had way better villains than the first 2 phases. For the most part, there's obviously a couple really good villains in the early films, but a lot of the times there wasn't either. But they've been on a pretty good track record for the past couple films, I would say. There's been a lot of solid villains, and Namor is no exception. He is a great villain. He has an interesting motivation for what he's doing, and it never feels like he's just this pure evil who's just trying to like kill and conquer and all that stuff. It never feels like that. He does have motivation that makes sense. You see some of his backstory, and that also makes sense, and I really love the way they portray him and the way they bring him into the story, and the conflict that arises with him, again, it all works. There's not a single point where I felt like his character was being inconsistent with his choices. There was one moment where I kind of felt like that, but then shortly after he explains it to someone, like it's they never leave me in that feeling of, well, that didn't really make sense. So I really love that character and his crew. I completely forget what they were called in the movie. It was something with a T. I kind of forget the name of the group, but they were all really interesting to watch. They had really different abilities than we're used to seeing because it was all water based. So it is not really a spoiler that some of this was in the trailer. You have like action scenes in the water and stuff, and all of that was just really cool to see. A lot of great visuals, a lot of interesting and creative visuals. The soundtrack in this movie, incredible. I know the first one, everyone was always talking about how good the soundtrack was. This one I would say is even better, in my opinion, of course. And I don't just mean like licensed music, I mean full on like the soundtrack, the original score for this film was just marvelous. I was in love with it. It definitely is something I'll remember. It's definitely something I'll listen to again because it does sound like it fits the film perfectly. And it's not just repeating the first film's soundtrack either. It doesn't just take all those motifs and just redo them. It actually has a lot of new music that we never heard in the first one, and it fits so perfectly. And then when they do bring like the Wakanda motif back, when they bring that back in a certain point of the film, it gave me the chills because it was perfectly fitting for that particular scene. Amazing acting performances as well in this film. Now, that makes sense because it's a more emotional, more serious film. You're bound to have better acting performances. Obviously, if you look at the more goofier Marvel films, you usually don't think of those films as having like the best acting performances. I mean, look at Thor: Love and Thunder. Are we gonna look at that film and be like, oh my god, that performance by Chris Hemsworth was just marvelous? Like, we usually don't think about that, but this is a movie where I genuinely feel like some of these performances are like Oscar worthy. Now, I don't really give a shit about the Oscars, I never have, because we all know how the Oscars works, but I do think a lot of these performances are within some of the best in the MCU. Letitia Wright playing Shuri, I think was amazing. Like, she was the lead of this movie for sure. She was definitely the lead, and I didn't know for sure if that was going to be the direction they were going to go before the film. There was a lot of controversy about, her behind the scenes during the filming because of, something with the COVID vaccine. I don't think she wanted to take it or something like that. And it honestly got me worried because I kept thinking, like, are they going to just like try to maybe work around her character because of all that? Are they going to maybe not include her in it as much as she probably was originally planned to? So I wasn't sure what they were going to do with Shuri as a character, but she is the lead of this movie. She is in by far the most amount of screen time compared to anyone else, and she is what this whole plot revolves around. And that makes perfect sense. Obviously, she's the sister of T'Challa. That would make perfect sense. And she's fantastic here. Like, I didn't think Shuri was like an amazing character in the first Black Panther. I always thought she was just kind of, fun, interesting person. She had like a fun, personality, but I never thought she was like a great character or anything. But this movie solidified her as an interesting and well-written character for me, to the point where I would say she's within like the top 20, 30, maybe top, maybe not top 10, but definitely within the top something of Marvel characters, for me at least. So I absolutely loved that performance by Letitia Wright. And then everyone else as well. Denai Guerrero, obviously, big Walking Dead fan. Obviously, I'm gonna absolutely love her in this film, and she was great as well. Again, better than she was in the first one, which I find to be kind of interesting because I feel like the first one was so much focused, obviously, on T'Challa and Killmonger that they kind of overshadowed everyone else. So I do feel like everyone else in that film didn't really have that many outstanding performances, that many, memorable scenes, because it was all about, obviously, T'Challa and Killmonger, which is not a bad thing. That's obviously what the film should have been about, and that's what it was, and it was incredible in that way. But because we get to see all these different characters actually get a spotlight now, it changed everything, and I really do think these are the best performances of each and every one of these characters. And I'm not done with the characters. There's even more who had great performances. Obviously, you had Ramonda, I think I'm saying it right. I hope I am. She was fantastic too. Like, another one that I think is Oscar worthy, and I'm not just saying that lightly. Like, that was an incredible performance. We also had Riri in this movie, played by Dominic Thorne. She is, of course, Ironheart. Originally, I had no interest in the Ironheart show when it was first announced. I've never really read the comics, but just by looking at it, I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'll watch it, but it's a younger character, so I was like, whatever. But I didn't know she was in college, honestly. I assumed she was like a child. Like, I thought it was going to be like a 14-year-old. That's what I assumed it was. Everyone kept saying, oh, it's this kid version of Iron Man, which is not really what she is, but that's what everyone was saying. So I was like, I don't really know if I'm going to be interested in that, to be honest. But she's not a kid. She's like 20-something, so I don't know why everyone was saying that. And she's decent in this movie. Like, she's not that important. She's got an important role, like her specific role is important, but she doesn't really do that much ultimately. But I do enjoy watching her, and I think she has a pretty cool suit. I didn't love the suit when I first saw it. I saw a leaked image, actually. Not leaked, I guess it was from like one of the trailers or something of her suit. And I didn't think it looked that good. I was like, that looks kind of stupid. But then watching it in action, I was like, okay, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. So I enjoyed her in the film. She was fine. And of course, M'Baku, played by Winston Duke, he was great too. Just like I said for the other characters, a lot better than he was in the first one, just because he got more to do in it. And I thought that was awesome. Obviously, you also have Nakia, and she was also great. Like I said, everyone was just better than they were in the first one, which I think is just really, really big and a really big accomplishment to have. That doesn't mean the movie was perfect, though. It definitely was not perfect. There were a lot of issues, and a couple of them are things that I feel like I could say about a lot of recent Marvel films for some reason, and I think it has to do with probably the pandemic. And that is some of the special effects. I'm sorry, I gotta say it. Like, I hate saying it because it's like, you're never gonna have a movie where the special effects are perfect. You know, it's very rare to see that. But I felt like there was a lot of points in this film, mainly towards the end, like the last action scene, the last battle of this film. There's a lot of scenes where I was like, it looks kind of like not very good. Like, you know, especially unfortunately with the Black Panther suit. A lot of the scenes with the Black Panther suit I thought looked really funky. And that was actually a similar issue I had with the first Black Panther. A lot of the scenes with the Black Panther suit looked off, and it's because it's very animated. The suit is supposed to be very animated, but there was not enough scenes with it being grounded. Like, I wanted to see more of it where it felt more grounded, it felt more like down to earth, and a lot of it was not that. A lot of it felt like you were watching like someone like it was animated, and that to me just kind of took me out of the moment a couple times. But it wasn't the end of the world. It really wasn't. There was a couple other scenes as well, but again, it's not the end of the world. These are just nitpicks, criticisms, little bits of criticisms. Also, when it comes to action, it definitely was lacking in that, and not in terms of like the quantity of it. I don't necessarily need a bunch of action. Like I said, this movie's very serious and story-driven, very character-driven, and I think it's brilliant within that aspect, but I do think it still is a Marvel film. You're expecting some action here and there, and the action that we do get, we've definitely seen better, I'll just say that. There was nothing like absolutely stand out, never a scene that was just like, oh my god, that's insane. It was a couple moments here and there, specifically with actually Namor. He did probably the most interesting action scenes in the whole film, but I feel like there could have been a little bit more, especially with Black Panther in this one. And the last criticism I have, although I was talking about the pacing being pretty good for the film, like it felt like it was on top of itself, you know, quite a bit. Every scene felt like it had importance to it. There was a couple moments where I do feel like things were kind of shifted kind of strangely. Like when one scene went to the next one, it felt like it was not positioned in the correct place, almost like it could have been in a different order. Maybe like you'd have a very serious scene sometimes and it would go to something that had absolutely nothing to do with that, and you wouldn't come back to that specific thing way later because of the fact that there's so much going on in this movie. It's a long movie, like I said, so when you have so many things happening, so many different plot lines, you do feel like sometimes you don't get back to certain things in a while, you know what I mean? Like it takes a while to get back to it, and I do think they could have done a better job of placing these scenes in a way that made it feel more cohesive than what it actually was. But that's all I gotta say about the movie. Honestly, I really enjoyed it. I think it was one of the better Marvel films this year. I didn't like it more than Doctor Strange 2, though. That movie, to me, is one of the best MCU films. I know that's unpopular, but I do believe it's one of the best. So I'm gonna give this an 8.2 out of 10. I think that's a good rating to give this movie. Yeah, definitely a good rating. Now, what about the spoilers? There's a couple spoilerly things I want to talk about. I think 3 really. First of all, Killmonger being in the movie was pretty cool. I like that little cameo appearance. I'm glad they didn't bring him back to life. I remember everyone kept saying, "Oh, they're gonna bring him back to life." I would have freaked out if they did that, because I hate when things do that, when they bring everyone back to life. So thankfully, it was just in the ancestral plane, and that was it. It was nothing more than that. I think it was a great scene, though. It was a fantastic scene. It was great to see Michael B. Jordan back, but it wasn't bringing him back to life. So that's good. Like that. Ramonda dying as well, I think, was handled really, really well, because again, that added a lot of stakes to what was happening, added stakes to this conflict, and it gave Shuri a very interesting arc. Like I was saying with her character and how much I like her character in this film, it gave her an interesting arc because she followed in her brother's footsteps, where she wasn't going to let vengeance consume her. She wasn't going to let the hatred she had towards Namor. She wasn't going to let that consume her and make it so she would end up killing him. So at first, actually, I thought she was going to kill him, and I thought that would be kind of dumb because it's like that kind of goes against her own brother. And if they went that direction, it would have to be like handled in a very interesting way for it to work. But I am glad she did not kill him, because it did make more sense for her character, and it made more sense to honor her brother in that way, because again, that was something that he believed in himself, so, and something he went through himself as well. So I think that was really cool. I love how it mirrored that, it paralleled that. That was fantastic. And lastly, the after credit scene with T'Challa's son, that was cool. That was a touching scene. I loved it. It was solid. I don't have much to say about it other than I appreciated this scene, and I thought it was really, really touching and emotional and great. So that is going to do it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I will see you all in my next one. Don't forget to check out my top 30 ranking of every single MCU film. Should be coming tomorrow, hopefully. I'm not sure exactly when it will, though, because it could take me a while to make it. I don't know. Peace out.